you go in the kitchen and you go and cook them their favourite dish that, they come there every week for or something like that. And you get this huge satisfaction when you see that there's smiles on their face, that they've enjoyed their dinner, they've had a great night. I mean, it's a great satisfaction. There's not much more you can do for them except to make sure that their night is great,
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. We've spoken a few times about families that have influenced the culinary landscape over generations, but few families have the incredible impact that the Toppi family have had. What's it like growing up in a family of such influence in regards to food, to then go on and carve your own path of influence too? Paola Toppi is the owner of Bar M and Toppi Bar and Restaurant in Sydney. Paola, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And lovely to be here this morning talking to you.
Oh, it's amazing to get you on the show. Your family has had the most extraordinary influence over so many decades on the culinary landscape. But what's it been like for you growing up in that environment and then, making your own sort of mark?
Oh, look, it's, the industry. The industry itself is very stressful, and working with families twice as stressful as that. But to be honest, it's been an extraordinary journey. The people you meet, the times that you have, and the experiences are just a second to none. So I've been very appreciative of this whole era. It's a sad era too, because as you know, Mum passed away last year, so we're moving on from there. But look, it's amazing. I started in this industry when I was very, very young, so it's all I really know at this stage in my life. So I'll be sticking with it. Hopefully, we'll get through this end of this pandemic, this era of upheaval for this industry, which has suffered so much. I can't tell you. But I'm happy to survive.
Well, you mentioned that you started at a young age. Was there a choice? Like, your family was already so influential. Take us back to when you were young. What was life like? Were forced into a career of hospitality?
Basically, I'd say that would be correct. It was never my intention, to be honest, because I could see it wasn't really the lifestyle that I had envisioned for myself. But, things change. Upheavals happen in life. My father died, and I was kind of dragged into the business to keep the family together. So, I started probably about 15 washing dishes, and just, basically I was a sub for anyone that didn't turn up for work. And then I went off and started a career in the fashion industry with some friends of mine, and that didn't pan out because then my father died, and my mother decided that she wanted to open a restaurant in the city. So she just turned up one day, handed me some keys, and said, "Go and open this restaurant." And I tell you, it was in a basement in Clarence Street, which is now is called Machiavelli's, but it was called the Kingfish Seafood Cafe, and it was horrendous. It was the worst place I've ever seen in my life. It was really, really bad. It was dirty. It was just infested. And anyway, so it took me about 6 weeks. I stripped it, I painted it, and we opened it 8 weeks later. So, and that's the story of how Machiavelli came to be. It was really, but you could do it back in those days. It wasn't all the red tape that you have now to open a restaurant. I mean, the license there is perpetual, so you don't have to put a new DA in every year to keep going or to change your trading hours. So it's existing use, which was amazing. Now everything you do now is every 2 years or every 3 years you've got to put a DA in to keep your hours, and just goes on and on and on. So the red tape now is I think it turns a lot of people away from this industry at the moment.
I want to explore the incredible influence in restaurants over the years that your family has gifted Sydney. But you were originally born in Naples, but grew up in Australia. Take us back to through your family's history in Italy, and give us a sense of sort of their background and the food that influenced them.
Sure. Well, my mother and myself, we were born in Naples. So the influence of seafood and Neapolitan food, which is classically simple, is my influence. And my father was from the Adriatic coast in a small town called Grottammare. And so he also had a lot of seafood influence in his taste. So, being from Naples, it's all about tomatoes and seafood and pasta. And because it wasn't, food was very expensive. Meat was very expensive. Fish was easier to funny enough, fish was cheaper than meat in places like that. Not like now, but anyway. So the influence was there when I was very, very young. I came to live in Australia with my mother and father, and she opened a restaurant in Edgecliff called O Sole Mio when I was about, 4. And it was a beautiful restaurant overlooking the harbour. And I remember clearly sitting on the benches in the kitchen where everyone would just pass by and feed me food. It was just, and then that was my first experience with restaurants. And then we kind of grew up in that environment for a long, long time. Mum had a few years off when she had my brother and sister, and then she went back in when I was about 12 or 13 to a restaurant in Potts Point, which is diagonally across from where Woolworths is now, or somewhere there. It was on the corner of Rockland and Mackay Street. I think it's an ANZ bank now. But that was a restaurant called Giovanna's, and that was beautiful, and that was a really good restaurant. And it was a thriving time in the 70s. Everyone, it was different to now. Everyone was out and enjoying themselves again. Just having a great time. And then after that, she opened La Strada, which was probably the premier silver service restaurant in Sydney for sure. There was very few restaurants at the time of that category. There was maybe 4, and they were all in this area, up in Potts Point area, which was, like it is now. I mean, it went through stages where it was, not so great, and then it became like the Manhattan of Sydney or the Soho of Sydney, and it's remained that way, really. I mean, extraordinarily expensive to be up here, even the rents and what have you, but it's just full of people. It's a great atmosphere up here. And that was La Strada. And La Strada was, like you couldn't do a menu like that again. I've still got the menu here. And it's like there was 150 dishes on this menu. And and every dish would come out as in a silver service scenario. The pasta would be served from the silver platters onto your plate at the table. There'd be Gueridon service where they'd cook steak Dianes and kidneys Madeira and crepe Suzette. And, it was a full-on experience. It was only a small restaurant. It was only a 60-seater at the time. And I trained under 2 remarkable waiters there, Frank Aranda and Ricky Spinelli, who were they trained as stewards on the ships back in the 50s, which was the highest ranking of service you could get, the best training you could get. In the industry, in the hospitality industry. So, I was very fortunate to watch them and work under them. And so I'm a little bit old-fashioned sometimes with my service. My staff don't quite get it. But it's probably because it was instilled into me at a very young age. I mean, I was 16 when Ricky, took me under his wing and taught me in La Strada. So, and Ricky unfortunately passed away last year too. So I think I'm the last one left.
Wow.
So
with such extraordinary restaurants of influence and a family sort of working in hospitality, what sort of food and feasts do you remember from when you were young? Like what sort of, is there any dishes or feasts that you can tell us about as a family that you share?
Oh, look, we will always go on every Sunday. We'd have, our family would have a Sunday lunch, and which would turn into Sunday dinner. It would go all day, and inevitably there'd always be some meat or fish, but the highlight was the homemade pasta. And that was every Sunday we sit there and we slave over it, because that was before you had machines and everything else to help you make it. You'd slave over the machine and crank it up by hand, and you'd make this beautiful velvety fettuccine or tagliatelle or tortellini or cappellacci or whatever the mood was for the day. And that was the highlight of the meal. We weren't really big on desserts. It wasn't our thing, but lots of salads, then the roasted rosemary chicken, which was a favourite of my father's, and or roasted lamb, and then there'd be salads, pasta, then the lamb, and then probably cheese, because really dessert wasn't our thing, and it would go on for hours, and my my contribution was helping with the pasta in the beginning and washing the dishes at the end, because I was the eldest and the other ones were quite young. They'd be out running around, and all the other kids in the family were much younger than me, so I'd be the one But that was all right. I didn't mind it because I got to stay with the adults, so that suited me more.
You mentioned the beginnings of Machiavelli, and at the time when it opened, there was only a handful of really influential restaurants like Edna's Table and Rock Pool. But what were the challenges for Machiavelli in the first couple of years?
Well, I think in the first 2 months, they got rid of fringe benefits tax, which was a bit of a shock to the system because people had been lunching and spending and having a good old time on the company credit card, and now that was all over. So that was a challenge, but it didn't seem to affect us. You're right. There was only about 6 restaurants that you could say was catering to the business lunch at the time, and there was not many restaurants even opening for dinner because it was really just a lunchtime trade, and so we kind of, I think Leo Schofield, he did this big review for us after about 3 months, and it was a terrific review. It was a double page spread in the Good Living or whatever it was called. It was Good Living, and I mean from there it kind of just went gangbusters for years and years and years. And it was a great experience, and we met so many great people, and people are still in our lives today, that we still know well, and they still visit our other restaurants now, and and then it's incredible that you could get such a kick from a good review back in the day. Now I think there's a lot of reviewers out there, and there's a lot of different platforms that kind of and it makes the waters a bit murky because you don't know who to believe or who to think, because you got young influencers and that they get on their keyboard warriors, I call them, and if they didn't get exactly what they want, or they didn't get a freebie, or they didn't get this, they inevitably give you a bad review, which I think is a shame in this industry, especially since we're suffering so long in the last 2.5 years, and the suffering is going to continue for at least a year and a half, I think. It's not clear cut at the moment. It's just really, and interest rates going up, less money to spend, more insecurity. It just affects everything. It affects the mindset. And also, can you imagine being locked up for 2 years? It's like a drug. You're hooked on that now. How do you get out of the house? How do you get them back into the restaurants? For the majority of people, I'm not talking about, the small restaurants that open up, that have the huge followings or, things like that, but the average restaurant, where the people used to go out twice a week or once a month or whatever, are now going out, 20% of the time they used to go out. So it affects everybody. And I think there's going to be major upheaval in the next 6 months in restaurants. They're saying wages. Wages have gone up 30% in the restaurant industry in the last, 2 years. And no one seems to realise that, because to hold on to your staff, you've had to offer a lot more money. In some cases, I think the staff are earning more than the owners. So, it's a difficult time.
I want to explore sort of the times that we're in and some of the opportunities or directions you think we should go in. But take us back to Machiavelli at the moment, and that decision of yours to change Machiavelli early on and jump in the kitchen, and it really changed what Machiavelli became.
Oh, well, yeah, like everything, that's why I never go to a restaurant when it opens in the first month, because I know inevitably they're going to change things around, and you don't want to have a disappointing experience when you know that it's going to be a good restaurant in the end, So, the first day we walk in there, I've done the menu, I've printed the menu, it's on the table, this and that. I'm on the floor, I'm on the floor on the antipasta table. My sister's on the floor in the bar, and my mother's in the kitchen. It was like Fawlty Towers. It was just shocking. It was a nightmare. Anyway, people scream. We scream. That's our nature. We all scream. So we're all screaming at each other in the middle of the room. They thought it was part of the show. I'm sure the clients thought this was hysterical. Anyway, so this went on for about 2 days, and then I said, that's enough. I said, we can't keep going like this. I think we opened on the Wednesday, so it was the Friday, which we had the weekend to recover from. And so when we reopened on the Monday, I was in the kitchen, Mum was on the antipasta table, and Katerina was on the floor. So, and that's how that, and it worked, and that worked because it just worked. Mum loved to be on the floor and talk to people. I loved to be behind the scenes in the kitchen and just get on with it. And my sister loved the floor too. So we all went into our I think, our fortes, where we were strongest. Whereas Mum didn't want me in the kitchen because, no mother wants their kids in the kitchen, not really. They'd much rather you have you on the floor and flirting with the men, etc., etc. I was single at the time, you know. so yeah. So I mean that's and that's how that Machiavelli ended up, and that went on till about, I think I left in about 2004 after the Olympics had been through, and then I went on and had a bit of a break from restaurants, and then I had a couple more. I went into a little pub foray for a little bit, and that was fun. And then I opened back in 2015, Shui Shui in Double Bay, which was a fun thing. It was just I wanted to tip my toes back in and to see if I could still do it, and it worked out really well. It was very good, very successful restaurant. But then the landlord came to me and said, he wanted to redevelop. So I thought, I just threw my hands up in the air and okay. Luckily, in the meantime, I had found Bar M down in Rushcutters Bay, which was the old 10 Neald Avenue, and that was a force to be reckoned with. I mean, the first day we opened, we had busloads coming in from the race course. There was about 300 odd people just rushing through the doors the first day. And we weren't ready. Trust me, we weren't ready. Which is why I said never go into a restaurant the first month. So, we made it work, but we weren't ready. It wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't great. Especially when I knew 90% of the room, and it was trying to make everybody happy in the right seat, in the right time, and get their food out. It was a schmozzle, but we got through that, and it was gangbusters until COVID hit. And now it's just completely different era, I think, in the industry.
What was it like working with your mother over the years? You mentioned that she passed last year. Do you have any stories of the influence that she had on you and the greater community as well?
Oh, look, she was a force to be reckoned with. She was amazing in the kitchen. She amazing talent, creating dishes and creating people, putting people together, which was, I think, her talent too. She was inducted into the Hall of Fame back in 1980s, into the Culinary Hall of Fame, and I don't think she got the recognition she should have got, because I mean her influence was really, really profound, especially in the Italian community, where everyone looked at her menus and understood that her menus were great. I mean, to be able to put 150 dishes on a menu and to be able to cook from this tiny little kitchen with 3 people is mind-boggling in today's terms, when people have 12 and 15 people in the kitchen. It's an art to put the dishes together that you can actually do that. Italian cuisine essentially is 6 or 7 ingredients. If you can keep to those ingredients, I mean, you may say maximum 10 ingredients, right? And you can create 150 dishes from those 10 ingredients. I mean, what's stopping you? And that's the trick to her cooking. It's the simplicity that makes it so good. And that influences all our food, even today, in a lot of restaurants today too, because they understood that good food, the main ingredient has to be the prize. You can't overpower the main ingredient. Whether it's protein or the pasta or whatever it is, and you need to emphasize that ingredient. And the only way to do that is with simplicity, because if you add too many herbs or too many spices or it becomes a different cuisine. It's not Italian anymore. The French have their butter, the Italians have their tomatoes and olive oil, and the Indians have their curry and, et cetera, et cetera. But, Italian food, in essence, and what she taught us all was the simplicity, is to have, even with 3 or 4 ingredients to create a whole cookbook from that. It's just amazing.
Are there any dishes that have been passed on that you now share in your restaurants that have been passed through the family?
Oh, look, I could say, at least half the dishes have been. Even it's not even just the dishes; it's the technique of cooking, the simplicity of cooking, and we don't have, apart from the ragu, there's nothing that takes more than 3 or 4 minutes. No, okay, and the steaks too. We have to go obviously 15 minutes for a steak, but I mean, essentially the pastas are all very a la carte, which is a lost. I think it's a lost technique now. A la carte is something where you make it to order. So people get surprised when they look at you and they say, "Oh, I don't want garlic, I don't want chili, I don't want this, I don't want." And we go, "Okay, no problem." And they go, "How do you do that?" I said, "Because we make it to order. So if you don't want it, you don't get it." And I think we lost a lot of that in the industry now, where the customer asks you something, and now you go to a restaurant and say, "Can I not have sauce on my fish?" And they go, "Nope." That's how it comes. And that's a lost art to remember that the client or the customer is the one that should dictate what they're eating, not you. And I think that's her lesson to us: the simplicity in the food, or the limited ingredients, and making the customers welcome and feeding them what they want. I mean, the only people that get by with asking what they want are the celiacs and the dietaries, but apart from them, no one else can ask for anything in restaurants nowadays, which I find annoying more than anything else.
Bar M is an extraordinary, it's a huge restaurant and a wonderful offering. Tell us how that came about and what you've created there.
Well, you know what? We walked in there and it was a big barn, and I can't tell you. And I looked at my husband, and who's a genius at. He's very artistic, and he looked at the walls, and I looked at him, and we got, these are grey walls. What are we going to do? We can't buy art because the walls are just too big. They're 15 metres high, they're 20 metres long. I mean, what do you do with these walls? And, he thought to himself, and he came up with this terrific idea of projections. And the projections have to be not just project anything, they have to be kind of a talking point. So if you're on a bad date, you can watch the walls, and but the walls were they were morphing, so they weren't interfering with the dinner. They didn't catch your eye unless you were looking. So it was the whole system of how we put it together, and his black humor, how some of the images he puts up there. It was amazing, and I got to hand it to him, because if it wasn't for that, those walls could be very grey and not create the atmosphere that we have. I don't know how you do a restaurant like that with walls like that in anywhere. I think they've done a few restaurants like this in London now and New York. People are starting to catch on. Like Vivid. Vivid is the same. It's the same technology. Right, so we had it back in 2015 or 16. We started that well before Vivid, and I think the technology is advancing day by day. And we at some point, if the restaurants pick back up, we'll look at new technology for the walls too, to make it another talking point. And we get a lot of functions there because of the walls, because people have put their own stamp on the walls, whether it be their logos or their images, or their, like perfumes and cars and all kinds of things that we do there. And I think it really, really stands out. I think if it was anywhere else in the world, you wouldn't be able to get in for months and months. I mean, Sydney's a bit of a hard taskmaster at the moment. They love to shift from restaurant to restaurant. They eventually come back, but the more restaurants open, the more you lose clientele for that 6 months, and then they come back again. But I think COVID again has changed everything. It's I'm only starting to see a trickle back of my older clients now, because they literally weren't going out at all. I've had clients come and go, "Paula, this is the first time I've been out in 2 years. This is the first." And the mind boggles that the government, in their efforts to protect us, have turned us into hermits. Which I can understand. Look, they had no option. They didn't know what was going on, and played it by ear, I think. But the whole world is now realizing the consequences of their actions. It's I don't know where we go from here, because it is difficult. I mean, Toppi Martin Place is in a premier position. It's opposite Parliament House. It's got a 30-story building above it, and we still struggle to fill it at the moment because there's no one in the city. There's a train strike, there's a march, there's a teacher strike, there's this, there's that. There's every day there's something, and it's really hurting our economy, I think. And don't get me started on finding staff, because that's just beyond,
What would help at the moment? You've got two really influential restaurants, and one of them is absolutely huge as well at Bar M. What would help, given the current climate, moving forward for you?
Look, I've still got a few foreign workers with me. If the government could just make it easier for them to get their citizenship or their permanent residencies, it would make it so much easier. But, to do that, it's a $20,000 exercise. And to be out of COVID for 2.5 years, people just don't have the money to do it. I mean, I don't understand why these visas should be so expensive. Even to renew the visas for my sponsored chefs and my sponsored managers, it's a $4,000, $5,000 exercise for me plus them. So it's a $10,000 exercise just to renew their visa every 2 years. It's too expensive at the moment, but we have no option, but we have to do it. We can't afford to lose more staff. I mean, my kids, they're all overeducated. They don't want to do this job. You won't find dishwashers that are Aussies. You won't find that many wait staff that are Australian. You find a few older 30, 40, 50s that have been doing it all their whole life as a career. But the young ones don't see it as a career anymore, even though they're probably earning more than the white-collar people in the city at the moment, I mean, the tips are good, wages are good, very high. I mean, I just don't know what else to do to attract them. There's just no one here at the moment to take up the jobs, And I'm willing to train them from if I see a little spark in their eye, I'm willing to sit there and train them. But you're not even getting that, But I don't know what to do. And I mean, there's some big groups out there that have swamped the industry and taken a lot of the staff. But good luck to them. That's they can do it. I mean, small little restaurants really can't afford to pay the wages that I mean, you're looking at $32 an hour for any staff member at the moment as a minimum. That's a lot. When the award wage is 22, so what's 50% more than the award wage? And don't forget, add tips to that. So they're on about $50 an hour. So it's a lot, and you still can't get people for the industry. That's the mind-blowing thing, that I think to myself, you will earn so much money. Just do it for 4 years, 5. Do it. Why? I used to get, back in the day when I had Machiavelli's, all the university students used to come and work 3 days a week. They don't even do that now. To work their way through uni. It was, now they get their HECS, so they'll pay it off later, so they don't care anymore. So it's all changed. The whole industry has changed, and I see a huge upheaval in the next 6 months. And I'm really worried for the industry, to be honest. It's a dangerous time. All the government protection is gone now. We just have to sit back and try and negotiate with our good landlords, and hopefully they'll look after or help us even more than they've already helped us, because God knows they're out of pocket just as much as we are. So where does it end?
Well, Barham sets an incredible standard, but it's quite huge. How do you run a business of that size and maintain the standards? I mean, what does it take to cook for that many people?
Oh, it takes a lot. And unfortunately, when we got the restaurant, it had this huge kitchen. And sometimes a huge kitchen can be a detriment, it doesn't complement, it doesn't mean that a kitchen has to be huge to get out big numbers. Because with the bigger the kitchen, the more numbers you need in the kitchen. So the more expensive it is to run. So, that was fine when you're doing 250 sink covers per session, but it's very difficult now in times like now where you're doing 80 to 100, So you're probably at 50% capacity of what you were doing before, but you still need the same amount of staff because it's such a big restaurant. I mean, from front to back, it's 50 meters. From across, it's another 20 meters. So, I've rearranged the tables a bit now so that the larger tables are closer to the kitchen to have less distance to move the food about. There's little tricks you can do, but you still need an inordinate amount of staff. And plus we have a huge bar there. And the bar obviously is not working at the moment because people aren't going out at night that much. So you still have to have a person on the bar. You still have to have the host or hostess at the front. And you still have to have 4 to 5, 6 people in the kitchen. So, and then the same amount of people on the floor. So, I mean, your ratio staff to ratio, customer ratio at the moment is quite high. I mean, you've got probably one staff member for every 15 people at most, probably between 12, just in that kind of restaurant. Whereas Toppi, which is also a large restaurant, but it's a different shaped restaurant. So therefore, I can run Toppi on half the staff that I run Bar M on. but Toppi will take more money. You know, it's a dilemma. It's a big dilemma. And you know, how long do you keep this going until you say, well, you know, maybe I won't renew my lease this year? And it'd be a shame because it's a beautiful restaurant, you know. But you have to weigh up the odds. Can you find staff? Can you fill the restaurant? You know, how many staff do I need to? What's the profit margin? And the profit margin already, you know, in restaurants is, you know, is ultra thin at the moment. I mean, it's beyond thin. I think most restaurants be breaking even or going backwards. I mean, very few restaurants will be making a profit at the moment. I mean, I look at, you know, there's a new restaurant in Double Bay. You know, it's a beautiful restaurant, but they have 30 people on the floor and 20 people in the kitchen. I go, how do you pay the wages and where do you find the staff? You know, and that's a restaurant that's doing 130 seats. So it's just mind-boggling, you know, what people are willing to do to you know, maybe set themselves apart from other restaurants where they know, you know, the service isn't great at the moment because we don't have enough trained staff. So, you know, someone will come along and think, well, I'm going to change this. I'm going to put so many staff on the floor that the service is going to have to be great. It doesn't always work that way, by the way. You know, sometimes, have you ever been overserved where the 5 people come up to you and ask you the same question? I mean, you know, it's quite annoying at that too, you know. So it's a fine line. It's a fine line how to run a kitchen and a floor. And then, you know, your kitchen has to get on with the floor and the floor has to get on with the kitchen. And then you have to get on with the management. And, you know, it's just, it's a little balancing act every day. You know, and then your customers, you know your customers. I mean, for somebody like me that's been in this industry for over 40 years, I know my customers. I know where they want to sit. I know what they want to eat. So, and then, you know, you argue with your mate and go, no, he's not sitting there. He's going back to his usual table. But, there's no buts. I said, just put him on his usual table. And so they don't understand. The young ones don't understand, you know, how to give that kind of service. And you train them and you teach them. And that's my job at the moment, is to train them and teach them, you know, to recognize the customers and to give them what they want. And maybe that's it. Hopefully that'll set us apart, you know, and help build us back up.
The last 2 years, as you've detailed it, have been incredibly challenging, and they continue to be challenging. But has the period of time changed you? Has there been opportunities and positives to come from this adversity for you?
Look, you know what? I don't think there's too many positives here, because your wages have gone up 30%. You can't find staff even if you wanted to pay them, you know, more money. The food costs, don't even get me started. How do you pass on these food costs to the customers? I mean, they would never understand it. That you have to start charging $70 for a piece of fish or a steak just to break even. I mean, how do they wrap their heads around that? You know, and so, you know, and people, I can't bring myself to serve offal, because I don't think offal is a thing that I do well. And I don't think that's, you know, I was never brought up to serve that in a restaurant, you know. But the only thing we ever served was kidneys Madeira, but that was a very specialist service, you know. But, you know, people are moving towards cheaper cuts of meat and cheaper cuts of fish, you know, and trying to make their profit that way. But I don't agree with that. You know, I think people go to a restaurant to have what they can't have at home. You know, and, you know, if you're going to have a beautiful porterhouse steak, you know, with the Marble 5 black market, Ranges Valley, they should only be able to get it from you. They shouldn't be able to get it from their butcher. And that's got to set you apart from you know, eating at home or getting takeaway, you know, which is another problem, that everyone's getting takeaway, and the quality of takeaway has really deteriorated too. And people's palates have deteriorated, so they don't even know the difference anymore after 2 years of eating, you know, at home and eating crap, basically. So, you know, it's the whole, I don't see too many positives out of the last 2 years, except for, I've got to hand it to the government. They did help. I think at least 50% of restaurants wouldn't have reopened if it wasn't for the government help. So that's a positive, I suppose. And I don't see how they can't continue, obviously. But I don't think the worst of it's over. And I think a lot of people are going to go belly up and then try and restart, you know. I think that's the only option.
You mentioned you've been in the industry for about 40 years, and your family for much longer, with incredible influence. Looking back at the family's influence and your career, what do you love about what you do?
Oh, I love the people. You know, I mean, I think if anyone in this industry can tell you the best part of it is the people. And, you know, and it's the good people, because unfortunately at the moment you're getting a lot of bad people too. A lot of people expecting so much out of you. It's hard. But, forget about the last 2 years. Prior to that, people were beautiful. People were great. You'd welcome them. They came in, and they'd be happy to see you. You'd be happy to see them. You'd have a chat and you'd have a talk, and then you go in the kitchen and you go and cook them their favourite dish that, they come there every week for, or something like that. And you get this huge satisfaction when you see that their smiles on their face, that they've enjoyed their dinner, they've had a great night. I mean, it's a great satisfaction. There's not much more you can do for them except to make sure that their night is great, So I love that. I love that about the industry, and I love creating new dishes, and I love seeing people's faces when they've tried it for the first time. That kind of thing is just, that makes me warm and fuzzy.
Well, you've made so many people warm and fuzzy over so many decades. It's been an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear a bit of you and your family's story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
I hope so. It's wonderful to talk to you, and you bring back so many nice memories for me, so I'll go and have a cry now. Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.